Hi, welcome back to CJ213 Corrections. I did lie in my last lecture. I said we'll be going into chapter 4, but we're actually going to jump into chapter 5. So chapter 4, you don't have to read, but you're more than welcome to read if you want to know more about that. But I don't find it to be as relevant in corrections, so we're going to go ahead and skip that chapter. So we're going to jump right into chapter 5, jails and houses of correction. If you take a look at the picture to the to the left of me here, this is actually a picture of the Guilford County Detention Center in Greensboro. You can kind of see how this jail is kind of laid out with their two-tier system. Um, so yeah, so this is the Guilford County Detention Center in Greensboro. All right, so let's go ahead and jump into the origins of the jail. So the concept traces back all the way to medieval England, where jails were used to hold suspects awaiting trial, but over time they kind of took on two purposes, which was both detention and punishment. When the English brought their system to North America, early colonial jails were simple structures, small rooms that might house up to 30 people. Often these jails were located right next to public punishment tools like the stocks, the pillory, the whipping post. Uh, it's important to note that the original purpose of the jail was not rehabilitation. It was strictly control and public shaming. And that mindset carried forward for centuries. So in the colonies, we see examples like the jail in Williamsburg, Virginia. It was built in 1701. It had additions in 1703 and 1704. The sheriff was responsible for housing and caring for prisoners, often using a fee system. That meant families had to pay for food services. But by 1773, Pennsylvania developed the Walnut Street Jail, which became a model for other states. This jail emphasized hard work and discipline as the path to reform. And at Pontiac, I saw echoes of that philosophy. Inmates who had meaningful work or structure, they tended to adjust better, while inmates with the idleness just created tension and trouble. Even today, the principle still remains. Work and discipline are tied closely to order inside every correctional facility. So by the 19th century, jails were housing children, enslaved individuals, people in debt, those with mental or physical illnesses. Eventually, children and the mentally ill were moved to other institutions, but jails continued to hold both pretrial detainees and convicted individuals, including felons. That mix, people awaiting trial alongside convicted offenders, is still a big reality today, and it creates a unique challenge for jail management. So the three primary types of local correctional facilities. First, jails, usually run by the local sheriffs, holding pretrial detainees and misdemeanor offenders. Second, there's lockups. Um, these are found in like police stations, used for very short-term holdings. And third, workhouses or houses of correction, which were used for short-term convicted offenders, usually involving hard labor. In my career, I personally worked with staff who had started in the county jails. They always pointed out the difference. In prison, sentences are longer. They always they always shared that there was some predictability. In jail, the turnover is constant. People are in and out every day. That creates a different kind of stress for both the inmates and the officers. So the characteristics: most jails in the United States are relatively small. They're they're diverse in size. They're diverse in challenges. They're diverse in programming. Some struggle with overcrowding, just like every correctional facility in the United States. They're all struggling with overcrowding. Others struggle with staff shortages, corruption, inmate victimization. This variety means there's no single way to describe the American jail system. It depends heavily on the state, the county, even the the local sheriff's leadership. I've toured some county jails. Some were clean, well run, orderly. Others were very chaotic, understaffed, very dangerous. That inconsistency is probably one of the biggest challenges for our correctional system. So, jails have many functions, responsibilities. They hold pretrial detainees, houses, housing sentences, generally for under 1 year, holding those awaiting sentencing, managing misdemeanor offenders, temporary holding driving while intoxicated offenders. Uh, this revolving door nature of jails affects everything inside. I worked in a max. Inmates stay there for several years or decades. You could build long-term structure, relationships, but jails, people are constantly coming and going, often within hours. That creates a totally different culture. More volatile, more emotional, more unpredictable. Jail officers deal with first-time offenders, intoxicated individuals, crisis, all mixed, all mixed in with experienced offenders. It's a lot. It's a lot to manage. Uh, my wife worked at the Guilford County Detention Center in High Point, so she definitely can attest to all this. It's very unpredictable. Every day is different, 100%. There is a routine, but within that routine there's a lot of chaos because the people are coming in and out. So jails also hold individuals on probation, parole violations, house witnesses, and protective custody. Sometimes they hold juveniles temporarily. They manage those awaiting release from prison. Each of these groups has different needs and risks. I know that we occasionally had to coordinate with local jails on inmates who were finishing long sentences and transitioning out. What struck me was how different the environment was for them, going from a rigid structure to a chaotic or under resourced jail. Keeping someone safe in that transition is harder than people think. Witnesses, juveniles, violators, they all need different management, and jails rarely have the staff to separate them properly. At Pontiac, we used to say that prison starts in the jail because before most inmates served long sentences, they sat in the county jail. Um, jail is the front door to corrections. So initial booking and classification. When someone's brought to jail, the first stop is booking. This includes identification, fingerprinting, property storage. After that, individuals may be released on bond or recognizance. If not, they're classified and assigned to a housing unit. Classification is critical. It determines whether someone goes into general population, medical, segregation, protective custody. I can't stress enough how important classification is. At, even at Pontiac, misclassification it always led to some kind of fight, some kind of assault, just chaos. Getting it right in jail is the first step to the safety and order. Okay, so jail populations. Jail populations are changing. We'll start here with the age. Jails today see fewer juveniles thanks to federal protections, but they see more elderly inmates than ever before. Elderly inmates require medical care, slower movement, special diets, and more time. I saw the aging prison population just explode. The same thing is happening in jails. But jails aren't designed for long-term medical care. Even simple things, showers, bunks, stairs, they can become major obstacles for older inmates. This shift just strains staff uh, and budgets dramatically. So then we have gender. Uh, Males vastly outweigh females significantly in jails, but the female jail population has been rising. over 69,000 women are currently incarcerated in jails. And one thing I learned is that male and female populations have very different behavioral patterns and needs. Females in custody have higher rates of trauma, mental health needs, and family family related stressors. When you combine that with jails being fast paced and under resourced, female inmates often fall through the cracks, especially regarding mental health and safe housing. So racial disparities are stark. Based on population representation, black individuals are nearly 3 times more likely than Hispanics and 5 times more likely than whites to be jailed, even in max security. A closed environment where everyone wears the same uniform, you feel the consequences of systematic inequality. Many of the men I supervised came from communities where jail was almost a rite of passage. Their experience within the system started long before they entered prison. These disparities in jails just rippled outward through the courts, prisons, families, and just entire neighborhoods. So social class. So uh, economically disadvantaged individuals are the least likely to make bail, the least likely to commit petty offense, the most likely to have mental health issues, the most likely to be considered flight risks, and often unable to afford fines or restitution. I saw firsthand how poverty shapes criminal behavior, incarcerated patterns, and reentry struggles. But in jails, these problems tend to be amplified. Someone who can't pay a $200 bond sits in jail for weeks, losing their job, their housing, and sometimes they go as far as losing custody of their children, all because this is all way before they've even been convicted. So jails often punish poverty more than crime. So adjustment to jail, it's difficult. The climate of a jail is shaped by uncertainty, uncertain release dates, uncertain court outcomes, and just boredom from inactivity. This makes jails stressful for both inmates and staff alike. We received at Pontiac, we received transfers from county jails. Those inmates came in wound up, stressed from the unpredictability. It took weeks, sometimes months, just for them just for them to adjust to the longer term structure of prison life. So jail administration and structure. Most jails, I've said it numerous times, they're run by sheriffs, and in over 3,000 counties, sheriffs are elected officials, which makes jails political institutions. When I worked at PCC, politics affected us too. Budgets, staffing, maintenance. But jails deal with political pressure far more directly. A sheriff up for re-election will run the jail one way. A sheriff facing lawsuits or bad press will run it another. That inconsistency can affect programs, the staffing, the training, and inmate safety. Some jurisdictions have looked for alternatives. State-run jails, cooperative regional jails, state subsidized programs, even privatization. From my experience, I can tell you that consistency in leadership and structure is absolutely critical. When systems consolidate, like regional jails, you often get better classification, more resources, and more structure. But privatization can create some major accountability issues. The way a jail is administered becomes the foundation of everything that happens inside of it. So, the types of jail supervision and surveillance. So, jail design obviously has evolved over time. So, first generation jails use linear intermittent surveillance. Officers walk down long highways, checking cells one by one. The figure that you see here in this slide, you can see a long corridor with cells stacked along the sides. Officers only see inmates when they pass by. Illinois had some older units that were built like this. Let me tell you, blind spots are everywhere. Noise echoes. Tension builds before you can even get to the end of this tier, of this gallery. Inmates know when you're coming and when you're not. This design created danger for staff and inmates alike. It's outdated, but unfortunately, it's still common in older jails. So second generation jails use indirect or remote surveillance. Officers sit in a secure control booth, watching the housing pods through windows or cameras. Um, let's see if we have. Let's see. Don't think I have a slide of that, but I did. Anyway, so this is actually safer for staff, but it's less effective for inmate management. In max security, we had control rooms kind of like that in our medium security units. The problem is exactly what you can imagine. Officers can't hear everything. They can't intervene quickly. They often miss the early signs of conflict. By the time you see a problem on camera, it may already be too late. Indirect supervision reduces interaction, and that can also create tension. All right, so this figure here, it shows the typical second generation remote surveillance layout. Notice how the officers would be sealed inside a booth with limited visibility angles. They rely heavily on cameras and kind of inmate behavior cues. I can tell you, cameras do not replace human presence. Cameras show you what is happening, not why it's happening. And you can't build rapport or prevent problems from behind glass. So new generation jails, they introduce direct supervision. Officers stationed directly inside the housing unit. The picture that you saw at the beginning of the PowerPoint, so that's a new generation jail. It emphasizes interaction, decentralizes smaller units, non-institutional environment. And where I came from, the units where officers engaged face to face with inmates, it ran far smoother than the units that would stay behind barriers. Direct supervision creates accountability, structure, respect. You learn, you see inmates' triggers, their stressors, their warning signs. So jails are finally catching up to best practices that prisons adopted years before that. So direct supervision. So we see how direct supervision works. Officers inside the living area. Cell doors controlled electronically. Central monitoring. This is the closest to how our higher functioning units operate. Direct contact with stronger boundaries. The officer became the stabilizing force. Inmates behave better when staff presence is continuous and predictable, and it definitely reduces violence dramatically. So this diagram here, it shows the open day room environment of direct supervision jails. Officers sit or stand among inmates, not above them, not behind a wall. It looks a little riskier, but experience has kind of taught me this. You prevent 10 fights for every one you have to break up simply by being present, talking, and building routine. Direct supervision turns the officer into a calming presence rather than a distant authority set behind glass. So fourth generation jails, total supervision. So fourth generation jails use the OmniView total supervision, 360 degree panoramic visibility from a mirrored glass control center. The idea is total coverage with fewer blind spots. It supports PREA compliance and reduces operational costs. In, in maximum security, we use similar observation strategies in high risk segregation units, centralized pods, panoramic angles, and constant visual monitoring. It works. It works well for safety, but it can also feel sterile and kind of isolating for inmates. Total supervision, it's a good tool, but not a substitute for the human presence and meaningful programs. So this figure here, this is the OmniView total supervision. Uh, so it kind of illustrates the control center at the core of the housing unit with complete visibility around its perimeter. Uh, from my experience, we we only had one of these in maximum security. So this would actually have been called uh, the Roundhouse in Statesville, um, which was in Joliet. Old prison, still active today. We call it the Roundhouse, and this was a giant cell house. It was huge, but this is how it actually works. So you had a a central control center there at the core of the housing unit, and it's highly effective. It's highly effective for suicide prevention, inmate movement. You can see everything, and obviously emergency responses. But again, visibility is not connection. Officers still need to build rapport with inmates to maintain some type of order and safety. Okay, so jail programs. Jails are often criticized for lack of programs, but programs do matter. They do have work release, GED, and adult supervision, or adult education, substance abuse treatment, counseling, vocational training, religious services. Programs programs in a prison make the difference between inmates who stayed stable and those who just deteriorated. When jails lack programs, inmates arrive in prison unprepared, unstructured, and often very angry. Jails that invest in programs create safer jails, and they create safer prisons. Or yeah, they create safer prisons. I'm gonna take a drink here. My throat's getting a little dry. So some crucial healthcare issues, they include communicable diseases, chronic diseases, substance abuse, prenatal care if you're a woman, smoking, mental health. We had full medical units, but even then we struggled to keep up with chronic illness and mental health needs. Jails have far fewer resources. Mental health and addiction drive much of jail intake. Without adequate medical care, inmates can deteriorate quickly, and that creates safety risks for staff and inmates alike. So, reducing recidivism. One promising initiative in the transition from jail to community, or TJC. It emphasizes leadership, collaboration, data driven strategies, targeted interventions, and sustainability. In other words, it focuses on reentry from the very start. So I saw the difference between men who had transitional planning and those who didn't. The ones with support networks, job leads, or community programs, they're the ones that had a fighting chance. The others almost always returned. So there is more than 200,000 jail officers in the U.S. Historically, they were poorly trained, but today they go through academies. In many counties, jail work is seen as a stepping stone to patrol. I can tell you, correctional work is not second tier law enforcement. It requires emotional intelligence, crisis management, physical awareness, and the ability to influence human behavior in very tight spaces. Jail officers deserve way, way more credit than they give. And I can tell you firsthand from having a wife that worked in a jail, it takes all that, and she had all that. So the roles are changing. So greater professionalism, more diversity, conflict mediation, extensive report writing, managing complex populations. I learned that a correctional officer's pen is more important than handcuffs. Documentation protects inmates, protects the officer, and it protects the institution. The modern jail officer, they have to be part counselor, they have to be part mediator, they have to be part social worker, and part tactical responder all at once. I saw this shift over the years. Officers became more skilled, better trained, more professional, but the demands also grew higher. Correctional work, whether it's jail, prison, it requires patience, it requires resilience, and a strong sense of purpose. So the issues of jail confinement. So the major issues include overcrowding, violence, mental illness, lack of community mental health resources. Overcrowding was one of the biggest predictors of assault. Contraband movement and stress. In jails, the impact is even more immediate because the population is constantly shifting. Jail officers deal with far more mental health crisis than prison officers. Many individuals with mental health illness, they just cycle through the jails repeatedly because they have nowhere else to go. And jail suicides are the leading cause of death inside jails. More than 300 inmates die by suicide each year, and the reasons kind of include withdrawal, loss of access to their drugs, their alcohol, isolation, just the shock of confinement, and obviously lack of support systems, lack of people, lack of family coming in to see them, lack of being able to call somebody on the phone and just be able to talk through it. You know, we had suicide watching cells. We had crisis intervention team, which I was actually a part of that. We dealt with the inmates that were mentally ill, the ones that said that they wanted to commit suicide, with structured protocols. But even through all that, suicide happens. And in jails, it's even higher because the intake is more emotionally volatile. Um, so you always have to look at that. So suicide rates are two to five times higher in small jails than they are in large ones, and so you do have prevention, like I was talking about earlier, monitoring, special cells, mental health screening, staff training, but and I can tell you too that suicide prevention was probably, I'd say in the later years, it was probably the most intense responsibility that we had, because every missed sign had a life or death consequence to it, and jails face those stakes daily, often with fewer staff and a lot fewer resources. I saw the effects of poor mental health support. Um, Many men, they already arrived at Pontiac traumatized, unstable, and once inside maximum security, those issues just deepened. That's why mental health care in jails is probably one of the most pressing issues that we face today. So looking ahead, we see new generation designs of the trends shaping the jails. Accreditation efforts. regional jails, privatizations, expanding program. Quality of life has improved in many facilities, but the challenges are still there, especially overcrowding, mental health, and the futures of jails will depend on how well we balance safety, cost, and rehabilitation. From my perspective, and I'll close with this. Jail is the beginning of the correctional journey. What happens there sets the tone for everything that follows. If we can get jail right, classification, programs, supervision, it can dramatically change the outcome down the line. But if we get it wrong, we just feed a cycle that leads deeper into prison. And prisons will be the next thing that we cover. I will be covering that in my next lecture on chapter 6. So I will see you very shortly. So have a good night.